So for those of you who are new, welcome to the third Food Historian Happy Hour. For those of you who don't know, we make cocktails every night and talk about food history, and you can ask questions, and it's pretty fantastic. So if you are here, please comment, because this is a new format and I don't know if anybody's watching. So, but yay, Glenn and Carla are here. Hi, Glenn and Carla. Yeah, it's not showing me how many people are watching, so that's kind of weird, but hello, welcome. Glenn's going to heat up dinner. Yes, I just scarfed dinner myself. I don't know if you can see, but I've got like mask marks on my face still. I went out for grocery shopping tonight, which I try not to do too often, but I do wear a mask and gloves and practice social distancing. So I did have to get one ingredient for tonight's cocktail, orange juice, because we had orange juice and then we drank it all. So is anybody else here yet? The video feed is being very flickery on my end. I don't know if it's doing the same for you guys, but that's all right, I guess. We'll figure it out as we go along, as I'm sure many people are doing in this day and age. Hi, Erin. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to move the laptop screen down a little bit so you can actually see what I'm doing. Hopefully. There we go. That's better. Top of my head's a little cut off. But, okay, that's too weird. All right, that's more of a happy medium. Hi, Heather. For those of you who were complaining last time, we are making a real cocktail with alcohol. Hi, Ashley. Thanks for joining us. So tonight's cocktail comes from a 1946 cocktail bartender's guide called the Roving Bartender. And it's called Applejack Rabbit. And it's called Applejack Rabbit because it's a cute play on words. It has Applejack. And I guess just Jack Rabbit was cute. So the recipe requires a cocktail shaker. And I'm using a real cocktail glass this time. We're not having a fizzy drink tonight, so no Collins glass. So I need a couple of ice cubes for my shaker. Try not to knock everything off the table here. And it's a pretty simple recipe. I actually have to open this orange juice because I just got it. Please bear with me. I probably could have gotten real oranges and used real orange juice, but because I also ate all the oranges, I didn't even save an orange for tonight. I don't know what I was thinking, but we're going to cheat and use bottled orange juice. All right, so it calls for half an ounce of orange juice, so this is going to be some killer pouring skills here. Half an ounce of orange juice. I forgot an ingredient. I'll be right back, okay? Don't go anywhere. I forgot an ingredient. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back with my missing ingredient. If you can't tell, this is a giant jar of brown sugar. Oh, thanks, Heather. Can't believe I forgot it. It's because I was rushing tonight. So I already put in half an ounce of orange juice. It calls for half a spoon of brown sugar. So that's a real guesstimate-y kind of measurement. So I'm going to say it's like that much. Okay, a dash of lemon juice. Not a squeeze, a dash. So again, I'm going to assume that the bottle is fine. And then 1 ounce of Applejack. Now, I don't remember who gave us this Applejack. Somebody must have gone to town at a party because it certainly wasn't me. I do remember being pretty strong stuff. So we'll see what kind of cocktail this makes. But it is official Applejack. All right, so it calls for a whole ounce. And as we discussed last week, a jigger is 1.5 ounces, so I'm not doing quite a full jigger. So this is actually also known as a pony, for those of you who are wondering. All right, let me get all this stuff out of the way. Oh, too much in the way. I don't want to knock anything off the table here while we're hanging out, because that would be bad. So I've got my cocktail shaker. I'm going to shake it for kind of a while because it's got brown sugar, and I think that's going to take a while to dissolve. Okay, now it's getting too cold to touch. Oh gosh. You guys, I can't get the lid off. Oh my god. Really? It's been one of those days, people. Oh my gosh, come on now. I'm like determined to get this off, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to. I give up. I'm gonna use my spoon instead as a strainer. Well, it smells delicious. That's for sure. Go away, cocktail shaker. All right, I'm also now going to, so we have the Applejack cocktail. Take a taste. Mike says physics. Tony says run the lid under warm water. I would, but then I would have to leave you again, and I would feel bad about that. It is definitely very strong from the Applejack. Yeah, it's interesting. You can't really taste the orange juice that much. It just gives you like, it kind of mellows out the Applejack a little bit. You really can't taste the lemon juice at all. I probably could have put in a little bit more. But there you have it. The Applejack Rabbit cocktail from 1946. And it's pretty tasty. Also, those of you who are watching will notice that this martini glass is not a 10-ounce martini glass like you can find. Yes, Neil, the Applejack is good, but I'm not sure this particular brand is that great of Applejack. But yes, this is not a 10-ounce martini glass like you see in a lot of restaurants and bars today. So if you've ever heard the term 3 martini lunch, people were drinking 3 or 4 ounce martinis, not 10-ounce martinis. So 3 martini lunch is like having 1 martini these days. Yeah, portion sizes pretty much everywhere, including in bars, have gotten a lot bigger. Did I get it for Easter? Did I get what for Easter, Heather? The Applejack? I've had the Applejack for a while. Someday I will, maybe I'll do a blog post about my bar in my house, which is so funny because Chad and I are not huge drinkers. But we love antiques and antique shops. And when we were first living together, we found, I think it was like $100. We found in an antique shop this little mahogany cupboard that's designed for a bar. So it's got like 2 doors that open up and a shelf in the middle. And then across the back is like this little shelf with all these little circles in it. And I found that if you have champagne flutes or cordial glasses, which usually the top is smaller than the bottom, you can put them in upside down and they hang in there, which is what I did, which is kind of cool. And also if you lift the top up, it has a mirror. I don't know why, but it does. So someday I will give everybody a tour of that. All right, it's really bothering me that my head is cut off, so I'm gonna readjust. There we go. Ah, I feel like I have so much more room. I could sit up. Oh my gosh, all these notifications. All right, so hi Glenn, you're back. Marty wants the recipe too. Okay, Marty and Heather want the recipe, so I will post this on my blog afterwards with the recipe and the link to the original digitized bartender's guide, which is fantastic. So an Applejack Rabbit is half a spoon of brown sugar, half an ounce of orange juice, a dash of lemon juice, and an ounce of Applejack. And then you shake it over rice and serve it in a cocktail glass. So Marty, I think you should introduce this at the bar that you work at. It's pretty good. All right, how's everybody doing tonight? It's been kind of a crazy week for a lot of reasons. I don't know if everybody saw, but on my blog this week on Wednesday for what I call World War Wednesdays, which is usually when I talk about a topic related to World War I or World War II, mostly World War I because that's my area of specialty. But I posted an article discussing the similarities between how Americans are dealing with the coronavirus pandemic and how people dealt with World War I and also specifically Spanish flu. Okay, Glenn says, does it say how strong the Applejack should be? It does not, Glenn. So I don't know how Applejack was in the 1940s. I would have to look that up. 1940s are kind of an interesting time for cocktails because we're coming out of Prohibition. But we're also at war for most of it, and there's the Great Depression before that. So I haven't decided yet if that's making people party more or if they're still figuring stuff out. So, oh, Mike asked, what kind of liqueur is Applejack? So or a liquor, I should say. It's an apple-based liquor, right? So this is Laird and Company. It says Laird's Applejack was first made by William Laird in Monmouth, New Jersey in 1698. So, of course, the two historians have to have historic liquor. That's probably why somebody got it for us. Around 1760, George Washington discovered this unique beverage, asked for and received the Laird family's secret recipe, and soon introduced Applejack to the Virginia colony. So that sounds pretty apocryphal, but it's basically apple brandy, right? This is 35% apple brandy, and this is 65% neutral green spirits, which is probably why it's very strong. I meant to look up the history of Applejack before this video, and then I forgot, so I might Google it. Yes, woo, New Jersey, Heather. You're welcome. If Andy is watching, Andy can also woo New Jersey. All right, I'm bothered now, so I'm going to Google how Applejack is made because I'm not sure. There's a couple of different options, and I'm not sure which one Applejack is. Okay, an alcoholic drink distilled from fermented cider. That makes sense. So it's basically hard cider more intensely. Yes, okay, thank you, Neil. Neil says it's frozen to concentrate the alcohol. Yep. Have you ever had ice wine? It's kind of similar. Yes, I'm sure historically it is ice concentrated. I don't know if it still is today. It's probably distilled. I'm not sure if anybody's ice concentrating their Applejack anymore because that would take a long time. So historically, colonists, of course, if anybody's ever listened to my podcast on apples in America, you can hear all about Johnny Appleseed and how the apples he was planting were not usually eating apples. They were cider apples. So people harvested cider apples to make hard cider, but then also In the wintertime, they would leave it outside and the water would freeze and they would skim off the ice, and what was left would be alcohol. And if you do that a lot of times, you get some pretty intense alcohol out of it. Heather, why has no one told you? Well, that's why you're watching this little show, isn't it? To learn all these fun facts. Anyway. It's kind of growing on me. You know how last time we talked about cranberries and we talked about the Cosmopolitan and why I didn't want to make a Cosmopolitan, but I drank a fair amount of Cosmopolitans in my college days. And this kind of reminds me of it. It's got that that kick, that very alcohol kick to it, but it's a lot smoother than the Applejack would be ordinarily. So that's a good thing, I think. So Heather, I gave Heather a quart of cherry bounce, homemade cherry bounce for her birthday. How much of it is left, Heather? Have you drunk a lot? There are actually some cocktail recipes that I found with cherry brandy as an ingredient. So I'm thinking about doing those for future ones since I have homemade cherry brandy now. So yeah. Hi, Andy. You missed New Jersey. I'm using Jersey Applejack tonight. You went through half of it already. Wow, that's pretty good, Heather. I don't know if you're supposed to drink a pint of cherry brandy. I'm sure you didn't do it all in one sitting. Right. Okay, well, is there anybody have any questions? Otherwise, I'm just going to talk about some food history stuff. Oh, Neil said Applewood Dave's jacks the fermented cider, then distills the resulting alcohol. Okay. That's pretty cool. Good to know. Neil, when are you going to do your own food historian happy hour? Maybe we'll have to coordinate something on Zoom. I don't know. I'm sure there are New York Applejack distilleries, Andy. But you're welcome for supporting New Jersey industry, although we bought it kind of a long time ago. Like I said, I'm surprised that there's only this much left. I think somebody probably got into it at a party. Or I think I might have had it out. I might have had hot cider at a party and people were doctoring. What else am I going to talk about today? I don't remember, to be honest with you. Ooh, Marianne Colopy says, what alcohol would you add to raspberry shrub? I have to tell you, Marianne, I am not a big fan of shrubs. They are a little too vinegary for me. But there are a lot of recipes that I've run across that call for raspberry syrup, which I sadly could not find in the grocery store, and then I forgot to buy frozen raspberries to make my own. I might have some raspberry jam somewhere that I could maybe turn into a syrup. But let me think about that. Raspberry shrub, what would go good with that? Oh, Neil says rum. Yep, otherwise, vodka is the ultimate neutral spirit. But yes, rum would be good. Oh, Heather asked, what's a shrub? That's good question, Heather. I forget sometimes that not everybody knows all the words that I know. So a shrub is a way of making a fruity, vinegary syrup that you would then use to make drinks in the summertime. So it's a way of preserving fruit with vinegar, which makes it a little bit safer than if you just make a sugar syrup. Oh, Neil. See, this is why it's so great to have an 18th century historian listening. Most of the shrubs in the 18th century were not vinegar-based. How were they made? Were they fermented? I'm so curious now. I have only ever seen them made with vinegar. Must be a 19th century thing. Sorry if there's a lag with the comments. I can only respond when I see them. Oh, yes, it said Neil wrote that a minute ago. How come I'm only seeing it now? Whatever. Sorry, guys. But yeah, rum, vodka. I think anything would be pretty good. Any kind of fruit liqueur could be delicious. Like if you did like peach brandy and raspberry shrub, that could be delicious. Yep. We have refrigerators now, Heather, but historically people didn't. So that's why shrub, people don't really drink shrub now unless you are interested in food history. Yeah, I'm liking the peach brandy and raspberry shrub idea. That sounds like it would be fantastic. Maybe throw a little seltzer or ginger ale in there. What? No. Oh, okay. Andy has a question. He says, eugenics, go. All right, clarification. What with the whole bunch of enthusiasm for eugenics in the era during the 1920s and 30s, how did that affect food policies during the time period you research? Asking because I've just started reading Malthus. Yes, well, eugenics definitely predate the 1920s. Actually, one of the things I talk about in my little blog post about coronavirus and World War I is that at the turn of the 20th century, white Anglo-Americans were starting to freak out about immigration and also about domestic migration from rural areas to industrial areas. And so there was a lot of concern about draining the American countryside of, white yeoman landowning farmers. So that's kind of where some eugenics sort of come into play. There's a really great book, which I don't think is in print anymore, but it's called, what is it called? It's Linoleum, Better Babies, and I'm going to Google it because I don't remember the rest. Linoleum, Better Babies, and the Modern Farm Woman, 1890 to 1930, by Marilyn Irvin Holt. So the Better Babies movement is like eugenics light. And interestingly enough, they did have like Better Baby contests in African American communities as well as white communities. But basically, it was like, is how close is your baby to being ideal weight, ideal height? Are they cute? Are they well behaved? Are they strong? But it was very closely tied into race improvement. And there were a lot of really messed up ideas about eugenics and what was inherited and what wasn't. A lot of really awful things happened in this time period because of eugenics, including sterilization of a lot of women of color, indigenous women, Black women, even some Irish Catholic women if they had a complicated pregnancy, they might go to the doctor, and if they had a C-section, the doctor would give them a hysterectomy without their permission. And then of course there's also sterilization of people with disabilities. So really screwed up time period in American history. Hitler probably inspired by American research into eugenics. So not a great time. Some of it was, I like to think some of it was innocent, but a lot of it was not. Most of it was steeped in white supremacy and racism. And how that affected food, I think eugenics, there's two tracks we can kind of take here. So one is the school lunch movement. Had kind of an impact on America in part because of a very famous story that's not necessarily quite accurate, but the apocryphal story is that during the draft for World War II, coming out of the Great Depression, something like 40% of the men who registered for the draft were malnourished. And that was freaking people out that we were not, Americans were not prepared for conflict with a large population of healthy young men. So that's kind of where the school lunch movement gets started. But eugenics is a lot about genetics and breeding of people. So there wasn't a ton going on in food at that time, but some of the ideas about genetics and eugenics that people could inherit, criminal traits, a lot of that is kind of starting to fall by the wayside by the time you get to World War II. But that was an idea that was around for a really long time, and really influenced how the poor were treated in the United States for a long time, including, workhouses and poor farms and prison farms and all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, Carla said it's not innocent. You like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but some seriously messed up stuff with eugenics, you guys. Sorry to be such a downer. Blame Andy. Sorry, Heather. Andy's your friend. It's your fault. So yes, Marianne, thank you for lightening the mood a little bit about an alcoholic peach Melba. Doesn't that sound fantastic? I would drink that. I would drink it. I'm going to drink some of my Applejack now. Does anybody else have any other questions? What are you guys drinking? Marty, did you make something fantastic tonight? It's like mellowing out the longer it sits. I don't know if that's the thing, but that's what it tastes like to me. Anybody? Yes, okay, so Carla says the CCC did similar things. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff coming out of the Civilian Conservation Corps, which I'm sure some of you guys have seen in the news, references to the WPA and CCC work programs. But yes, there's lots of anecdotal evidence about guys going into the CCC and being undernourished, being hungry, and then the kind of work they were doing, they did about 6 hours of hard physical labor every day, 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon. And they were getting fed 3 hot meals a day, as much as they could eat. And a bunch of them put on weight, put on muscle, really bulked up. The combination of abundant food and hard physical labor really helped a lot of people put on weight. So similar to Marianne's question, she says, in the Scranton, PA Coal Miner Museum, there are lots of pamphlets about leaving behind the food of the old country and to cook American. So once the World War I book is done, eventually, I think my next project is going to be on regional food in America, because there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening with that. Really, regional American food starts to decline after the Civil War, in large part because of access to railroads and refrigerated railroad cars in particular. So you get kind of weird things like housewives in North Dakota ordering flats of peaches from Georgia to can them, home can them. That's a thing that happened because of our food transportation revolution. In the 1900s in particular, there was a real concerted effort among white, Anglo, middle and upper middle class progressive reformers. It's a mouthful, but that's largely who those people were. To Americanize immigrants, because they really worried that with the diversity of immigrants coming in from all over Europe and all over the world, and in particular undesirable immigrants, mostly from Eastern and Southern Europe. Previously undesirable immigrants were Irish. Before that, in the 18th century, they were German. So our concept of who is American and who is desirable and not has changed a lot over the past couple hundred years. But particularly in the 1900s, there was a real effort to Americanize them. But American was defined as white, Anglo, Yankee, so mostly New England culture, which is very specific and not everybody enjoys. So it was kind of an uphill battle, I think. I think I mentioned last time we talked a little bit about this, the 1923 cookbook, which I don't think I ever shared with you guys. Sorry about that. I'll have to make myself a little note, about how to serve immigrant communities in hospitals and how to adapt. Let me just make a note. How to adapt invalid cookery for different immigrant groups. But yes, definitely Americanization is part of that. And that it's actually connected to the WPA, the CCC, and World War II, because for the first time you have Americans coming together from all over the country. We're a lot more organized in our war efforts in World War II than we are in World War I. And people are eating the same food, which again is largely Yankee Anglo food. So there are Southerners, for instance, in the military who, when they have Thanksgiving, are upset that there's not sweet potato pie and cornbread stuffing and oyster stuffing and all these other traditional Southern foods for Thanksgiving. It's the New England version of Thanksgiving. So a lot of that has an Americanizing effect, even on, you know, people who were born and raised in the United States and whose family had been here for hundreds of years. Okay, let me just make this note. Okay, Annie is drinking rooibos tea with honey, yummy. It's definitely freezing cold out today. It snowed outside my house, which was kind of crazy, but there you go. Ashley is drinking kefir, which I actually found a reference to in a cookbook from about 1907, I think. So that was kind of cool. Okay, Heather says, what can we do for local farmers now? And what did the Hudson Valley do for local farmers in 1918? Great question. And I'm probably going to give you way more information than you want to, but that's okay. So one thing you can do right now, and this actually will help food supply systems all over, is to buy direct whenever you can and to buy local products in grocery stores. There's two reasons for that. One is that the money goes right back into the local economy. Sorry. And the other is that local suppliers don't have to travel as far to bring you their goods. And these are things that also happened in 1918. Part of the reason why there was a war garden movement, war gardens became termed victory gardens toward the end of World War I in the United States, and that's a term that's recycled in World War II and like every time since anybody wants to plant a garden for any reason. Like a lot of people are talking about victory gardens now, although I did see one person who said victory was too strident, so she's calling hers a hope garden, which I thought was very sweet. But one of the reasons for planting them was that they didn't tie up transportation. If you're harvesting food from your own backyard, it's not having to be shipped anywhere. And also you don't have to leave your house. So there definitely has been a huge upswing in vegetable seed purchases, particularly online. And most of the major seed companies that specialize in heirloom or open pollinated varieties are completely overwhelmed. They're either completely shut down or there are serious delays with ordering. But yeah, if you can get stuff locally, that's what I recommend. I've also seen some information that indicates that CSA shares are skyrocketing. CSA is community supported agriculture. And how that works basically is you pay a farmer a set amount of money for a season, and then each week you get a share for your investment, a share of the farm, usually delivered to a location that you then go pick up. So they're like boxes of vegetables, fruits. Some farms do eggs or honey. Some farms do maple syrup. Some farms do meat. You get meat boxes. But that has also really dramatically increased. And there's some speculation that, you know, this might help reform our modern food system if people keep doing this, which I think would be fantastic for a variety of reasons, not only because the produce quality is usually better and fresher, and not only because you're supporting your local economy, but because you are also reducing that sort of really energy intensive transportation, especially if you're only picking up once a week. Farmers markets, it's a little debatable about how energy efficient that is. But CSAs, I think, are a little more efficient. So in 1918, truck farmers, they're called, which is vegetable farmers, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with prices and food in 1917 in particular. Because there was so much competition for food on the world market, we did not yet have a globalized food market where we were growing in massive amounts of food for export like we do now. That starts in World War I, in part because there's so much demand by the European nations at war for exported food, or rather imported food on their end, that the United States really ramps up production eventually, not right away. In part because of when we enter the war, and also it's good for farmers when prices are really high and commodities are scarce, because then they make a ton of money. So they're often reluctant to ramp up production. So there were a number of government policies to encourage farmers to increase their production, some of which actually resulted in surpluses, which Herbert Hoover, the United States Food Administrator, kind of had to scramble to figure out how to absorb those surpluses so it didn't completely tank the market, which is always a problem. And then dairy farmers, and I'm sure you guys have seen in the news stories about dairy farmers having to dump their milk. That's a thing that happens more than you would think. Right now, it's happening for a variety of reasons. One is that, as with a lot of our food in the United States, a big chunk of bulk food is purchased by restaurants, colleges and universities, and schools. And they're not doing that right now because they're largely shut down. So when you are selling in bulk to a purveyor who is dealing with a large volume of food, it's a completely different shipping and packaging situation. So for instance, in Florida right now, it's strawberry season and tomato season. And strawberries in particular, when you're dealing with bulk customers, they're packed in flats. And they're not packed in individual plastic containers when they're in those flats. It's just it's about this big cardboard box, about that high, full of strawberries. And they can do that because when the strawberries get to the restaurant or the cafeteria, they're just all processed pretty much immediately. Most people, unless you have a giant family, most people do not buy like that. They cannot use that amount of produce before it goes bad. It's usually much more expensive. And grocery stores have a hard time with that because of the fragility of a lot of that produce. So we're talking about things like strawberries, tomatoes, leaf lettuces, other berries like blueberries in Georgia, zucchini, things that are quite fragile and easily damaged if they're handled a lot. So it's not like apples or bananas or, celery and carrots, where if they get bumped around, it's not as big of a deal. And a lot of people can handle them without damaging them. So part of the holdup with that, and there are people who are plowing ripe fruits and vegetables back into the ground. A lot of those fruits and vegetables in storage are being donated to food pantries in the local areas where they are, but the food pantries are being overwhelmed because one food pantry doesn't really need 8 semi-trucks full of flats of strawberries. But that's what the farmers have on hand. And then also they have to pay people to harvest crops that are ripening right now. And then they know if there's no market for it, it doesn't pay to harvest them. So there is a lot of food being wasted for a variety of reasons, but the main one is the distribution network is not what it needs to be. The same thing is happening with milk. A huge chunk of the fluid milk market goes to Not only restaurants and cafeteria situations at schools, where normally that fluid milk is packed in bags to be used in big, dispensers. But it's also being turned into giant tubs of sour cream. It's being turned into giant things of cheese, stuff like that. It's just not packaged on a scale that ordinary people can use. And people have talked about, oh, well, why can't they pasteurize it on the farm, or why can't they just put it in storage? People dramatically underestimate how much food that is and how much storage that would need. Most modern dairy farms, particularly those that are members of corporate dairies, and a lot of co-ops are pretty corporate these days, they just don't have the storage facilities on the farm, and they also don't have pasteurization facilities on the farm. And there are a lot of food safety laws that are designed for your protection, that you can't just sell raw milk on the farm unless you're applied for a special license, and you can't retail it. People have to come to your farm to buy it. And you can't bring your own container, because if your own container is contaminated and you get sick, you could sue the farm and nobody would be able to determine if it was your container or the milk that got you sick. So as Carla, my friend Carla, who's watching right now, used this analogy the other day. Modern American food production is a giant cargo ship, and we're asking it to make a really sharp turn, and it's not doing a good job of making that kind of turn. Barry wants to try raw milk. You can definitely try raw milk, Barry. You have to find a farm near you that allows you to purchase milk from the farm. That tends to be the law in a lot of states. Some states allow for raw milk to be retailed, but most states, if they allow the sale of raw milk, you have to buy it direct from the farm. I think in part because they want you to go and look at the farm. So if you go and look at the farm and it's dirty, probably don't want to buy that milk. Yeah, Sandy also points out people do not understand the mechanics of dairying, the need to milk twice a day, and you need to be able to store it or you have to dump it. Yeah, cows don't stop producing milk. You have to milk them twice a day. You have to. And for most dairy farms, that's hundreds of gallons of milk, thousands of gallons of milk. So they do have holding tanks, refrigerated holding tanks, on site usually until the milk truck can come and pump out the tanks and take it to be processed. But, not usually more. Like, the milk truck usually comes at least once a week, if not more. So after, how long have we been on shutdown? A couple of weeks now. That's a lot of milk that's got to be dumped if it's not getting picked up. Yeah, it is a yikes, Heather. It is a yikes. I was actually talking to someone on Facebook today about he's trying to organize some logistics to see if we can get the product from the farms to people who can use it. My recommendation is that we send milk south and send vegetables north and do like an exchange to food banks. But it's tough. Nobody likes to see food wasted. And that was actually something that happened in the Great Depression as a way of stabilizing prices, because the government paid people not to produce. So farmers got paid to dump milk and they got paid to plow under some crops, which was very upsetting to a lot of people during the Great Depression when people were going hungry. So they probably could have handled that a little better, but they were really trying to stabilize the economy and stabilize farm prices, which had just been crashing like everything else. Yes, Sandy, you lived across from a dairy farm, or my husband grew up on a dairy farm. So that's why I know anything I know about dairy farming. And of course, there are some other people on right now watching who also grew up on dairy farms. One thing I didn't mention about 1918 was that dairy farmers in America have been struggling with prices for over 100 years. Because a lot of the problems that dairy farms are having right now, crashing prices, farmers getting paid less than it costs to produce the milk, that was all happening in 1918. New York State was fairly influential, actually, in forming the New York Dairymen's League which spread beyond New York borders. They had members all over the place. But basically, it was one of the first agricultural co-ops that was formed on a large scale to try and influence milk prices. And there were a couple of similar milk co-ops, not the Dairymen's League, somebody else, but who got kind of a bad reputation in the 50s. My father-in-law remembered this, for burning the barns of dairymen who would not participate in the contracts. So it's been kind of fraught. Okay, Barry says, aren't they doing the same now? I heard the government was paying people not to produce now during COVID. I don't know. I have not heard that, so I don't know if that's true. And to be honest, it would surprise me, because modern agricultural policy, if you are not a commodities farmer, so if you are not producing wheat, soy, corn, cotton, or sugar, you get very little help from the federal government. If you are producing those, you get a lot of help. Corn and soy in particular, you get subsidized, which in the United States means that there is a set price floor for the market. And if the market price goes under that price floor, the government pays you the difference, which is also the reason why we have our modern industrialized corporate food production that we have now, where everything has corn syrup and soy in it, because corporate food processors can buy corn and soybeans for less than they cost to produce, and the government subsidizes that. Now, is that crazy that we're subsidizing really unhealthy food? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But that's how our modern agricultural policy is. If you are a dairy farmer, it depends on your state. In large part, there are some state protections for dairy. For instance, in North Dakota, where I grew up, there were a number of protections for dairy, including which you could not give away milk. So as a kid, I saw this one time that there was a grocery flyer, and it was like, buy 3 boxes of cereal and get a free gallon of milk. And then there was a little asterisk that said, in North Dakota, gallon of orange juice. And I asked my mom why that was, and she said it's because there's laws protecting dairy farmers in North Dakota. Sadly, North Dakota doesn't have much of a dairy industry anymore. It used to have a huge dairy industry. Now it's all oil and sugar beets and corn. But yeah, I'd have to look that up, Barry. But it would surprise me. Also, not a lot of assistance for fruit and vegetable farmers. For instance, it's very difficult for them to get crop insurance. So yes, and making junk gasoline out of it. Yeah, so corn and soy definitely play a role in ethanol, which not everybody enjoys. Yeah. Most of the corn and soy production in the United States is not used for human consumption, believe it or not. Most of it goes to livestock feed and also energy production, which is sort of crazy. Oh, Sandy says some places are paying dairymen for their herds to take them out of production. Well, I have to say that's good, because that's the only way. I mean, dairy farms have been overproducing for a couple of years now, which is part of the reason why it's such an issue, is because a lot of these dairy farmers have been losing money for the last couple of years, and they just have no margins anymore to weather any kind of financial distress like they are now. So yeah, paying people to take herds out of production is a good thing. Part of that is we just have a tendency to encourage people to overproduce, the kind of get big or get out policy that was introduced by my favorite American food history villain, Earl Butz Jr., who was Secretary of Agriculture, I think under Nixon in the 1970s, who did a lot of radical changes to American agricultural policy that benefited large corporate farms and hurt small family farms. So not a fan. But yeah, that would be a good thing if we took the herds out of production. So we've overproduced. And then also demand has gone down. A lot more people are drinking non-dairy milks. So I don't know why. I love milk. I don't like non-dairy milk. We might be single-handedly supporting the dairy industry in my family. I have almost 2 gallons of milk, and we had 3 things of whipped cream. Plus, I have sour cream, cottage cheese, lots of cheese, and cream in my fridge right now. I actually overbought milk again because I don't know what day it is. So when I went grocery shopping on Monday, I bought a gallon of milk that expires on Sunday. And because I went grocery shopping today and I didn't want to go out again, I bought another gallon of milk, but it doesn't expire for another 2 weeks. So, oh, Carla says, what does take them out of production mean? That is a good question. Oh, also Neil posted a really great historic punch or shrub recipe. So we'll look at that later. Taking cows out of production means one of 2 things. One is that you stop breeding them so that they stop producing milk. But the other is that you kill them. Yep. The dairy industry, I love milk. The dairy industry, one of the reasons why animal rights activists and vegans, militant vegans in particular, do not like the dairy industry is because it can be quite cruel. Because I think people forget that in order to make milk, the cow has to get pregnant. So you're breeding cows every year, and then weaning the calf early so that you can get maximum milk out of the cow. And then there are also some kind of awful feeding techniques that can really wear out a cow within just a couple of years. So some of the really worst big industrial dairies, you might get 5 to 8 years out of a cow, and then they, as Neil says, they kill them, send them for meat production. The end. The more responsible dairies don't do that to their cows. And they're a little kinder to them. One good thing is a lot of dairies, you grass feed your cows. Not exclusively, not year round, but they are in pasture most of the time, which cannot be said for pigs and a lot of beef cattle. So that is one good thing. Glenn says, I exclusively drink milk during this happy hour. I drank milk like water when I was growing up, so hopefully I will never get osteoporosis. I don't drink it quite as much anymore as a beverage, although every once in a while it's nice to just have milk as a beverage. But yes, Neil also points out that in the dairy industry, male dairy cows are not valuable, which is how we get the veal industry. Man, we are just really talking about cheerful topics tonight, but we'll talk a little bit about the history of veal. So when the baby cow is born, if it's a female cow, they will keep it because it can also be bred to produce dairy. If it's a male cow, they feed it on milk and then slaughter it while it's still a baby cow, which is how we get veal. Veal is milk-fed baby cows. Now, there are ways to do ethical veal where, you don't separate the cow from its mother. You don't feed it milk until it gets diarrhea. Yeah, which is what a lot of veal places do. I've been to a veal farm. It stinks of ammonia and poop, and it's gross. And a lot of the really unethical veal farms keep the baby cows in cages so they can't move, because if they move, their muscles will get big and strong, and that's not what you want. With veal, you want tender, soft, milk-fed baby cow flesh. But historically, a long time ago, you didn't necessarily have, especially if you were not particularly wealthy, you didn't necessarily have dairy cows and beef cows separately. So you would raise your male cows for beef and your female cows for milk. In the 19th century, really, that's when breeds started to get very specialized. Most cow breeds today in the United States are Holsteins, although you do, on smaller farms, you still have brown Swiss. My personal favorite is the Dutch Belted, which when we were growing up, we called Oreo cows because they're black with a white belt around the middle of their bellies. There are lots of those in North Dakota, so they were always Oreo cows when we were driving around. And then, of course, Guernseys and Jerseys. Jerseys are like the queen of cows. They produce super high butterfat content milk, but not as much of it. Holsteins produce the most volume of milk, which is why they're the most popular. But yeah, that's dairy industry in America in a nutshell. But I mean, gotta do something with the baby cows. I am not opposed to ethical veal, which is where the baby cows are left with their mothers for a lot longer, and then they're allowed to like graze on grass and be outside, and then you just cull them for meat when they're a little bit bigger. But like foie gras, there's an ethical and an unethical way to make veal. Neil says he loves jerseys. I love jerseys too. They are the prettiest cows. They have like this pretty fawn colored, light brown fur and these big eyes and these little cute little white muscles. They're so cute. If I were to have a dairy cow, I would actually prefer a Guernsey, believe it or not, Neil, because as Ashley can maybe chime in, because her grandma kept a Jersey, the butterfat is so high that it's hard to bake with their butter. Because modern butter has water added to it to make the butterfat content consistent, regardless of what cow it comes from. And I don't know if everybody saw my little video on butter making in France. That was interesting. I would love to know what breed of dairy cow they were using. I have never heard of Channel Island cows, Andy. Is that a Canadian thing? You'll have to send me information about that. So anyway, that was our little digression into the history of agricultural policy in 20th century America. We can talk a lot more about it if you want to. That's my other love. I actually got my start in food history in agricultural policy, believe it or not. I don't think that's usually the route people take. But when I was in college, I did a project on a farmer named Randolph Probstfield, who kept diaries of his farm for like 60 years. And he was an experimental farmer. So he got his farm registered as an experimental station with the Minnesota State Agricultural College, wherever that was. I think it was in St. Paul at the time, because he was living in the Red River Valley between Minnesota and North Dakota in the 1860s, which is very early for white settlement in that part of the country. But he put together an experimental farm, so I did a paper comparing his diversified experimental farm to modern sustainable farm tactics and how they were connected. And now you know how big of a nerd I am. Okay. Okay, Channel Islands. Oh, that makes sense. Andy says the Channel Islands are the islands of Jersey and Guernsey. Isn't there a book, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society? They made a movie out of it. The movie was very good. Yeah, the Channel Islands were occupied by the Nazis during World War II. Ashley has homemade butter from her grandma in the fridge. Oh, yay. Yes, freezer. I freeze butter all the time. By the way, fun fact, fun tip. You can freeze butter almost indefinitely. And yeah, so every time there's a sale on butter, I'll buy like 8 pounds of butter and put it in my fridge. I did that just the other day. Because then you never have to worry about baking or if you have enough butter for bread. Neil, do you know Randolph and Catherine Probstfield? I totally did a big project on them. And, by the way, I am the reason why their first couple of diaries are digitized on Minnesota Reflections. That was a project I did for my very first real history job out of college, which was executive director of the Probstfield Farm Living History Foundation, which was his historic farm in Oakport, Minnesota, which is just north of Fargo-Moorhead. Yes, everybody has a freezer full of butter. Great. You're prepared for the pandemic. So much baking. How do you know them, Neil? I'm so intrigued now. Sorry, I totally hit the I hit the table. Um so speaking of butter and baking, I've been doing a lot of baking lately. I don't know if everybody follows me on Instagram. You can if you want to. I'm at Preserve or Perish on Instagram. I posted I made an apple cake the other day because I had a bunch of apples I needed to use up and I felt like cake. It's from the Virginia Hospitality Junior League Cookbook, the Bicentennial Edition, although the one I have was published in 1984, I think. And it was just the weirdest cake. Like, so when you've read as many cookbooks as I have and you cook as much as I do, you kind of get a feel for recipes. Like, you can tell when you read them, like, what's normal, what's not normal. You know, is this really how this recipe is supposed to be written? And this was one of those recipes. So it called for, you can find the recipe on Instagram, and I'll probably post it on the blog at some point too. But it called for, it was a 9x13 pan. It called for 2 cups of flour and 2 cups of sugar, 4 cups of apples, a stick of softened butter. I think it was 2 eggs, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. That was too much for me, although Chad likes it. And then some nutmeg. I cheated and used pumpkin pie spice because I didn't feel like grating half a teaspoon of nutmeg. And some walnuts. So it said to finely dice the apples, which I did, and I had 4 cups. And then you're supposed to whisk all the dry, and baking soda. You're supposed to whisk all the dry ingredients together. And then I put the apples and walnuts in and like coated the apples. And then you just put in the butter and the eggs. And that's it. 1 stick of butter and 2 eggs for an entire 9x13 pan. And I was very skeptical that that was going to be enough moisture to bake that cake. But it did. And the weirdest thing of all is that all the apples, like, disappeared. Which I was very disappointed by. I was looking forward to a cake full of chunks of apples. Oh, and you baked it at 325 for an hour. It was weird. It was weird. It was good. Chad loves it. It tastes kind of like carrot cake, to be honest with you. It's like Chad's new favorite cake. He's like, why did you make a whole pan of it? But it was weird for me. I liked the buttermilk cake I made the other day better. That was good. Also on Instagram, and I posted on the blog, buttermilk cake with blackberry frosting. That was very good. I would definitely make that again. I also made a quick bread, a soda bread. I should drink. We've been on for an hour and I'm not even done drinking my cocktail. Okay. It is a lot of cinnamon, Marty. But I made a beer bread, basically, but instead of making it with beer, I made it with hard apple cider. And it was good, but it was too much sugar and not enough salt. So I have all this whey left over because I made farmer cheese, which I'm totally going to do again. It was delicious. And the recipe that I used to make it into dinner didn't turn out exactly how I hoped. It was good, but it was not what I was expecting. So, and I have all this extra milk now, so I think I'm going to make it again. But I have all this whey. So I'm thinking about trying to make the beer bread recipe with whey, even though it's not carbonated. Because, of course, most of the activation is with the baking soda, which is basically a soda bread. So I'm going to experiment, I think. Yeah, Glenn, the apples basically turned into juice, although the ones I was using were not very juicy. They were kind of mealy because I left them out on the counter for too long. But that's why you turn them into baked goods. But yeah, Sandy's looking for the recipe right now. Yeah, I'll post the apple cake recipe maybe with this blog post because I did take some pictures after the fact. Wow, this has been a really fast hour, you guys. We've been on for over an hour. Does anybody have any last questions while I finish my adult beverage. So ricotta is made from whey, Neil, but I couldn't figure out if you could do it with acid whey because it's the whey that I have has lemon juice in it. So I didn't know if that was allowed. Maybe I'll try that too. I have a whole quart of it, and if I make more farmer cheese, I'm gonna have probably 2 more quarts of it. So I'll see what it does with bread baking because I only need 12 ounces for bread baking, and then see if I can make ricotta from the rest of it. Okay. Oh, Sandy was reading the recipe while I was talking. Okay. Yes. Oh, sorry. I thought you said you were looking for the recipe. You said you were looking at the recipe. Any last questions before I sign off? Or we could keep going. I mean, I could talk about food forever. So. Oh, Neil has question marks. I'm assuming about ricotta. Yeah, apparently there's whey that's fermented, right? Or from like farmer cheese that you make by clabbering or fermenting raw milk, and then there's whey that comes from when you add an acid to separate the curds from the whey. Yeah, actually, I think your whey is the fermented whey. Whey, WHEY, for those who are watching. The stuff left over after you make cheese. I hate to throw it away. So historically, a lot of dairies that made cheese and butter and all that stuff, they would mix their whey with wheat bran, which is a byproduct of flour milling. Because, of course, when you make white flour, you take the germ or the bran out of the wheat. And then you mix the whey and the wheat bran together. And that apparently is really good for feeding pigs. So, oh, Marty has put in a request for egg white cocktails. I have to say, so obviously I've done a fair amount of cocktail research for the full series. And I kind of want to try a flip, which has a whole egg in it usually. Although egg white cocktails also interest me. I'm a little freaked out about the possibility of salmonella. But I buy free range eggs and I could wash them really well before I make it. I've heard the key to making a flip, which has a whole egg in it, is that you have to shake it in the martini shaker or the cocktail shaker for a whole 30 to 60 seconds, which is a really long time. But I guess that's so you can emulsify it. Okay, we're having requests for flips next time. If I get sick, it's all your guys' fault. I might do it, yeah. It seems kind of like an eggnoggy sort of thing. Neil says that alcohol kills it. Does it, Neil? They of course, anytime you see like an official recommendation for a flip, they're like, use pasteurized eggs. But then I read another article that's like, if you use pasteurized eggs, it's a totally different ballgame. Because of course, to pasteurize eggs, you have to heat them, right? So changes the chemical structure of the egg. Glenn is correcting me. Thank you, Glenn. The germ is the inside of the wheat and the bran is the outside. Thank you for the correction. I'm just so used to associating them with whole grain. Because, of course, I don't know if everybody knows this, when you buy whole wheat flour, it's just white flour that they put some of the bran back in. Yeah. Same with brown sugar. Nowadays, it's just white sugar that they put some molasses in. Man, everybody's all about the flip. All right. You've convinced me. I'll find a flip recipe. Hopefully I have all the alcohol for it. I don't know if I have spiced rum, and I definitely don't have vodka, so it'd have to be a flip with something else. All right, last call. Last call for last questions. Anybody? You guys have been super awesome tonight. We've had such great questions. This was really fun. And of course, I'm just going to keep doing these every week at 8 o'clock, unless you guys think I should do later. I've had some requests from people who don't live on the East Coast to do them a little bit later. So what do we think about doing them at 9? Let me know. Yes, Neil points out that there are hot and cold flips. We actually talked about that in the first episode, believe it or not. I think I would probably do a cold flip because doing hot things is difficult. I was thinking about doing a hot beverage tonight because it's freezing outside. That's why I'm wearing my cozy wool sweater. But keeping the hot water hot when I'm not in the kitchen was something that I had to think about. Oh, Neil does point out that the hot flip will not have issues with the eggs. That's true. Sandy says 9 is okay with her. Heather says she might be asleep by 10, but it's a Friday. You don't have to work in the morning, right? All right, so I have been tasked now with doing a flip next week. So I'll have to do some research. I also had a request today to talk about tonic next week. So I think that will be on the menu. I do know Tom and Jerry, Neil DiMarino. I actually saw, this is the collector in me, so I don't know if you've noticed or figured out, but I collect a lot of vintage glassware, probably more than I should. That's probably, is that Ashley liking your comment? No, it's Marty. Okay. Ashley also loves Tom and Jerry's. I saw a full Tom and Jerry set, the bowl and the cups and everything, on sale for a very reasonable price, and I did not get it because I do not have any more room in my house for any more vintage glassware. In fact, I have several boxes upstairs of vintage glassware that I need to get rid of. So if you are a milk glass, mid-century milk glass connoisseur, let me know. I've got a lot of it. I did not buy the Tom and Jerry bowl and mugs, in part because they were custard glass, which is kind of an ivory colored milk glass, and I'm just not a fan of custard glass. I don't like it. I do own, however, two punch bowls with cups. My giant milk glass punch bowl. I'm going to boast a little bit. Neil says storage units are great. Ask me. I have a whole room upstairs that's basically a storage unit, and I don't have to pay rent on it, so they're staying there for now. But I am probably one of the few people that I know, besides Neil, who has punch bowls and uses them regularly. I have a giant milk glass one, beautiful fluted milk glass with beautiful fluted milk glass cups, and then I bought another set of milk glass cups to go with it, even though they don't quite match. And then I have a crystal one, and I got the milk glass one for $8. And I got the cut glass one with all the cups and ladle for $3. So I love me a bargain hunt. So when this is all over, if anyone wants to go antiquing and thrifting with me, I will totally do that with you. I know some great places in Little Falls if anybody wants to drive all the way out there. That's where my in-laws live. Or I have not been to any of the big antique places like Brimfield. So, because I normally work weekends in the summer, but I would be totally up for that. So we should plan that. Okay, friends, my cocktail is empty. We've been chatting for an hour and 15 minutes. It has been a delight. Thank you so much for everybody's great questions this week. Thank you for letting me ramble on and on about agricultural policy. And I hope we will see you all next week. So this is the food historian, Sarah Westbrook Johnson, signing off. And hopefully we'll see you next Friday at 8 or maybe 9. I'll do a little poll for the Food History Happy Hour. All right, so have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.